Hello, and welcome to Math Class with Mr. Head. Today we're going to be estimating decimal products and quotients. In other words, we're going to be using estimation to help us multiply and divide decimals. We'll start off by thinking of what we already know about estimation and how we would use estimation to help us solve multiplication problems. I've given us several example problems here. The first one is 12 and 8/10 times 185 and 3/10. If I was to estimate these, I would say that 12 is pretty close to 10 times 200 because 200 is pretty close to 185. 10 times 200 would be 2,000. So I know that my answer for my decimal multiplication problem is going to be pretty close to 2,000. Let's look at the next example. 896 and 1/10 times 2 and 7/10. 896 is pretty close to 900 times 3 because 3 is pretty close to 2 and 7/10. 900 times 3 would be 2,700. So I know once again that my answer for my decimal multiplication problem will be pretty close to 2,700. Let's look at example number 3. 4 and 1/10 times 7/10. 4 and 1/10 is pretty close to 4 times, I would say 1 because we could round 7/10 up to 1. And so I know that my answer is going to be pretty close to 4. Take a look at our last example on this page. 9/10 times 3/10. 9/10 is pretty close to 1. And then if I'm multiplying anything times 1, I know that it's just going to be that number. So I don't even need to change 3/10. 1 times 3/10 is 3/10. So that's how we do the estimation part. Now I'm going to show you how to take your estimated product and use that to help you know where to place the decimal in your multiplication answer, in your product. So on this page, I want us to use estimation to place the decimal point in the answer. So if you'll take a look on this side over here, I have a multiplication problem. And over here, I have the answer. However, you'll notice that there is no decimal point placed in this answer. So what we need to do is we need to figure out where to put the decimal. And that's where estimation comes into place. Or comes into play here, all right? So 18 and 6/10 times 95 and 2/10. 18 is pretty close to 20. And 95 is pretty close to 100. So 20 times 100 is 2,000. So I know that my answer is going to be pretty close to 2,000. So if I look over here, think to yourself, where can you put this decimal point so that this number is the closest to 2,000? Think about that. That's right. You would put the decimal point right here between the 0 and the 7. So our answer would be 1,770 and 72 hundredths. Let's look at the next one here. 42 hundredths times 417 and 2/10. So if I look at this one here, 42 hundredths, I could think about estimating or rounding that up to 1, but I don't know if that would help me much here. Or I could round it down to 0, but that wouldn't help me much. So another way I could think of this is that 42 hundredths is pretty close to 5/10. And 5/10 is another way of saying 1/2. So 1/2 times 400, what is half of 400? That's right, it's 200. So my answer is going to be pretty close to 200. So where can you place the decimal over here in this series of digits so that it has a value of almost or about 200? That's correct. We're going to place it here between the 5 and the 2. So that's how we use estimation to help us know where to put the decimal in multiplication, the decimal multiplication problems. All right, let's take a look at how we can do something similar but with division. How would you use estimation to place the decimal in these quotients? This page is similar to the previous page where we have a decimal problem here. In this case, it's division. And we have our answer here, but there is no decimal point placed in the answer. So we have to find out where we need to put the decimal point. And we're going to do that by using estimation. 40 and 5/10 divided by 3. I would think about it this way. 30 divided by 3 is 10. So the quotient should be more than 10 because 40 and 5/10 is more than 30. Placing the decimal point between the 3 and the 5 is the only way to make the quotient in the tens. Our next one is 150 and 88/100 divided by 4. I thought about 160 divided by 4. I know that 16 divided by 4 is 4, so 160 divided by 4 equals 40. So my answer should be close to 40. Therefore, I will put my decimal right here between these two sevens. 3 6/10 times 6/10. In this one, I would think about it as 3 divided by a half. How many halves can fit into 3? I know that there's 2 halves in one whole, so there would be 4 halves in 2 whole things and 6 halves in 3 whole things. So my answer should be somewhere around 6. So I will place my decimal right here behind the 6 and in front of that first 0. Our last example on this page. 1 54/100 divided by 7. I know that 1 54/100 is less than one group of sevens. So the answer must be less than 1. So my answer is 22/100. Okay, guys, let's take a look at 2 final examples for this lesson. 104 and 92/100 divided by 8 6/10. I would think about this one as 100 divided by 10 equals 10. So I would place my decimal right here between these two 2's, which would make my answer 12 2/10. 1 71,000 divided by 2 1/10. I would think about this one as 1 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2 or 0.5. So my answer should be pretty close to 5/10. All right, guys. So that concludes our lesson on using estimation to help us place the decimal in our multiplication and division problems.